Hey guys, welcome to another tutorial. In this one I'm going to be covering how to utilize and use the events on the VRIF knobs. We're going to build this simple TV mechanic that switches in between channels and has a volume knob. The volume knob has been converted to a +1, -1, and then I've converted that from a 0 to 1 value. So I'm going to show you how to convert the 0 to 360 to those for the volume knob. So you can use it for things like RC cars and stuff like that. So anyway, first turn it on. You can't hear the audio because I don't have my audio hooked up. You'll be able to switch channels for a simple, TV mechanic. And then you have a volume knob that'll go from 0 to 1. Pretty useful. I thought I might use this in a scene where there's maybe a news broadcast on a couple of different channels that I can interact with, and then maybe at the end it just goes to an end broadcast because of some major event, like I don't know, maybe a missile or something. Or maybe you just want to set up video for your own private home theater. You can do that as well. But this will give you the basics on how you can do that, and then by the end of this I hope you have a new mechanic and you are a little more familiar with the knobs, so stick around. Okay, before we get started in Unity, I wanted to point out the video player's compatibility for your file formats. These are the video file formats that you can use for the player. I'm using MPEG-4. I found the easiest way to get something like short video clips into MPEG-4 is just to upload it to YouTube and then download it back, and you'll get it back in MPEG-4. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do that with a huge movie or something like that, but for your information, here it is. It's in the Unity manual under video file compatibility. Another thing with Unity, let's see if I can get to it quickly. Let's see. If you go into the API, let's see. So if you go to the API for video player, this will give you all your information about the player and how we can interact with it with code. I'm not going to go into this stuff in this video, but I just wanted you to be aware of it, that if you wanted to make like play buttons, stop buttons, pause buttons, mute directly and stuff like that, all that information is here on the API. So you can set it up for however you're wanting to do it. Alright, so I'm in Unity. I'm just in a blank screen. This is one of the scenes in the BNG's framework. Only difference is that I've added an advanced rig. No particular reason. First thing we need is some video. So let's create a new folder. And we'll call it video. Okay. Now, when you're working with video, one thing I want to point out is you want to keep all your aspect ratios the same. So if you go to your video file and you right click on it and you click properties, this will give you all the information about your video. As you can see, the width is 1280 and the height is 720, and it's an MPEG-4. So you want to keep this number handy, because for everything in your video player, you want to keep all of your aspect ratios the same, and that way you don't get grainy video. Everything looks the way it's supposed to look and you get good video quality. So once you're happy with find your clips, just pull them into make sure I've got that in the right spot. I didn't. Let's go into our video folder and grab these, and we're just going to drag them in there. Okay, so once you've got them, name them so that you know what they are. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this to video 1. I'm going to rename this one to video 2. Okay, so now we got our videos. So now let's right click, create, and we're going to create a render texture. We're going to call this one video 1 texture. And just right click and duplicate it, and we'll call this, just duplicate it. And we'll call this one video 2. If I could type today. Okay. Yeah, make it uniform. Why not? Okay. So I'm just going to put these in a folder with it to make it easier. Slap those in your video folder. Take video 1. Before we do that, come up here, same thing like I was saying, you want to keep your aspect ratios the same, so 1280 by 720. And same thing on this one. 720. Keep your aspect ratios the same. Okay, so now let's set up our TV. So let's go into our assets, go into BNG framework, go into prefabs, and then down here you'll see you've got UI canvas, UI cursor, and UI example. We just want the UI canvas, so just pull it in there, pull it up, get it over where we can see it, and then for our rotation, we just want 0, 0 it out so we can see it. About to move this around a little bit. And we'll just rename this, well, unpack it first, and rename, call it my TV. Bring it out, delete that. Now remember me saying everything about your aspect ratio. So for width, we're going to go 1280, then height is going to be 720. Okay, right click on it, and then we're going to come down to UI and add a panel. So now we've got a panel that's the same ratio as our videos. Pull that up a little bit. Okay, then for our panel, we'll just make it black. Just because, oops. And just because, you know, TVs are usually black. You could put another TV behind this, but the idea is to use this as a screen for a television asset. So underneath our panel, we're going to need 2 images. So come down to UI, come down to raw image, and we'll call this channel 1. And same thing with our aspect ratios, 1280, 720. Then we'll go ahead and duplicate that, and we'll rename this to channel 2. So now we have 2 image files that are the same aspect ratio as our video. Now we're going to need 2 video players. So go down to video, add a video player. We'll call this video player 1. And right click, go down to video player. We'll call this one video player 2. Yeah. And these don't need to be children of channel 1 and channel 2. And we actually don't want them to be children. You'll see why when we get going with this. Okay, so then right click on my TV, and then we're going to need 2 audio sources. So come down to audio source, and we'll call this audio source 1. And just duplicate it. We'll call this one audio source 2. And save, often. Okay, so now let's go back to our assets, go back into our video. Let's come up to channel 1, and you can see that you got a texture. Well, we want it to render to a texture, so we're going to take this and we're going to drop that in there. And then we're going to come down to channel 2, and we're going to drop that one in there. And then if we come up to our video player 1, we're going to take clip 1, we're going to put it here, and then it's asking for our target texture, so we want 1. And then if you come down to our video player here, I'll slap this video clip in there. It's asking us for where we want it to render to. Well, we want it to render to a texture, so we're going to do texture. Well, texture. Okay. Okay, so now if you hit play, you can see that our videos are now rendering on our textures. So if I click on this one and I get rid of this, see I've got this one. I get rid of this one, I click on this one. Alright, sorry about that. I had a phone call. Sorry about the ringing on the video. Anyway, where was I? Let's see. Okay, so let's come down to video 1. And you'll see here, let's make sure we got all our settings correct. Okay. And we don't want direct, we want audio source. So switch this to audio source. We're on video 1, so you want audio source 1. And then we want this to loop. What we're wanting to do is we want to simulate a television. So you can make it loop or not, or maybe at the end of the play in your code, you had it show like an end of broadcast or something like that. Anyway, come down to video 2, make it loop, and then we're going to change this to audio source, and then we're going to drag our audio source 2 over there. Okay, so now if you come down to your audio source, we want a 3D effect on this. So we want it to sound like when we get closer, we want the volume to get louder. When we get further away, we want it right to left to give us that 3D kind of effect when we come close to the TV. So on your spatial blend, just take that and bring it all the way over to 3D. And then on our Doppler level, let's see, where am I? Doppler level, set that to 1. Yeah, that's a pretty good start right there, but this will give you that kind of getting close and then backing up from an effect, and then you want 0 to 500, and then you can play with these settings. And then for source 2, we're going to do the same thing. Just bring this over to 3D, and same thing, we'll just leave those pretty much the same, and then you can play with those settings. Let's click back on video 1 and make sure that we've got everything here. We want it to be muted when we're on because it's not going to be on a station, so we don't want to be able to hear it. So same thing here, mute it, and then you don't have to set anything else. So let's come up to channel 1, and we're just going to disable it. And same thing for channel 2. And I'm going to check the settings on my video player real quick. Okay, so for video, we want this to be set to fit outside, even though it's not going to matter because we kept our aspect ratio. But okay, so now we need a couple of knobs so we can control this thing. So let's go into B&G framework. Go to prefabs, then we're going to come down to our knob, and we'll just pull that up. And pull it over, pull it down. Somewhere in there, you can line it up better if you want. And then we're just going to say on our X, -90. And we'll call this our, what do we want to call it? We'll rename it to channel knob. And we'll unpack it. Now if you look on here, we don't want to be able to grab this whole knob and just throw it around, so go ahead and disable the grabble on the main parent. If you come down to knob handle, we want this one to snap. So if you come down to your hinge helper, you can see we've got it snap 2 degrees, and then what degrees you want. So we're only going to start with 2 channels, but you could have it snap to 10, 20, 30, 40, whatever you want. For our sake here, we're going to have it snapped to, what do I want this to snap to? 90, I think. I want to have it set to. Better look. Snap degrees. Oh, where are you? Yep, 90. So it'll go from 0 to 90, then 90 to 180, and then 80 to 270, and then 270 back up to 0. And yep, that's all we need to do for that one now, right at the moment. And then we'll just duplicate this and drag that up here, and we'll call this one, let's see, rename. Where are you? Rename this to volume knob. Now this one, we want this one to have, we don't want it to snap, we want it to be smooth, or maybe you do want it to snap. Same thing, make sure the grabble is disabled on the main parent, and we're just going to pull this up and come down to our knob handle and come down to the bottom, and we don't want this to snap, and we want it to move. I'll just set that to 0. It doesn't matter because we're not going to snap degrees. So right now you've got a free spinning 0 to 360 knob. So this would be outputting 0 to 360, and it would just turn all the way around with no limits whatsoever. We're going to limit this knob, and we're going to switch it to where it moves from about 160 to 160, where you can set it to 100 to 100, and we'll output a value of -1 to +1. So you can use it for an RC controller, and then from there I'm going to show you how you can convert that -1 + 1 value to a smooth 0 to 1 value for things like volume that take a 0 to 1. So that's going to be done in code, and we're going to hop in and do that right now. So let's come over to assets. We'll make a new script. Call it CC. Let's see what we want to call it. We'll call this TV control. Sure. Go ahead and open it up. I'm just going to copy paste this whole thing, but we'll go through it. Okay. So we need our game object, which is our render textures. Same for channel 2, and then we need the audio sources that go along with them. Scroll down here on hinge change. This is where we're going to pass our channel changing knob value. Whenever you're controlling a method from an event, most of the time they're going to have an amount in here. So you're just passing your value, your hinge amount float that is on the knob to this method to use. So we're going to assign this to our knob, and then it's going to run this, and then it's going to pass our hinge amount from that knob to this script. So then we can say if our hinge amount, remember we're snapping on 90 degrees, so we can say if it's snapped to 90, so if it equals 90, so when we snap it, one to the right to the 90 degrees, it's going to see that, and then we can run this function. Same thing, if it equals 180, we can run this function. So all we're doing is when we snap to 90, it passes that float amount. It sees that it's 90, and it's going to set channel 1, which is our render texture 1, to true. So it's going to enable it, and then it's going to mute, or it's going to unmute the audio. So we'll have the audio for channel 1, we'll have the video for channel 1, and then it's going to disable channel 2, our second one, and then it's going to mute the audio 2. It's set to true, so mute true, and mute false. So mute false means it's got audio, mute true means it doesn't have audio. And then we're just doing it again, but the opposite for 180 degrees. So when we snap it to where it's pointed at 6 o'clock, it's going to be showing 180 degrees, and then it'll run this function, which just does the opposite. It turns channel 1 off, and it turns channel 2 on. If it equals the other two amounts, so if it's 0 or 270 degrees, those channels that we have, it's just going to turn them both off. It's going to mute both the audios, and then it's going to disable the texture so we can't see it. But the idea is these things are going to play on a wake so that they all keep playing. So you can switch in between the two channels, but the video doesn't start over, just like a normal TV would be. That's the idea behind this. That's the basics of how that works. It works the same thing with audio if you're making a radio with, fake broadcast and stuff like that, and music in a car or something like that. You wouldn't want the audio to start over or the video to start over. You'd want it to be like you're switching channels on a TV. Okay, so our volume, the same thing with the knob. We're just doing a public, and we're going to assign this to the knob, and we're going to pass the float value of that knob here. Once we have it, we're going to make a float output value. And we're going to convert the 0 to 360 to a negative 180 plus 180. That's what this line of code does. And you can look this up, or you can look at it. Loops the value t so that it's never larger than length and never smaller than 0. So basically what this does is it's just making it, negative 80 to 180. And then once we have that value, if you wanted to keep it that way, let's say you were, you needed to control something in angles instead of degrees, which is what we're doing. We're converting our degrees to angles. Maybe you need that value. But then we can convert it to negative 1 plus 1. So how we do that is we take our output value, which is, let me back up a little bit, because I've already done all the math here. So let me back up a little bit. Okay, I had to regather myself to try to explain this without rambling on. Let's say I just wanted this to output a negative 1 to plus 1. So I needed to convert my negative 180 to 180 to a negative 1 to plus 1. Well, all I'd have to do is take my hinge amount, say I had it set from 180 to 180, and just divide it by 180, and that would give me a 1. That easy. So if I had a negative number and I divide it by 1, or divide it by 180, then that would give me, so this, if I change this to 180 and say I had it going from 180 to 180, this right here would give me the value that I'm looking for. Now the way I've got this set up is the limits. When we do the limit, your limit amount has to match whatever you put right here. So we're going to limit it from 100 to 100 on our joint. And if you change it to 120, say you want it to move smoothly further, you want the limit to be in a different spot, you would just make this number match. And you want this not to be a negative number. So if you had negative 100 to 100, you would want to just put 100 here. So, yeah. Now how did I get this to go from 0 to 1? Well, once you have that math, If it's less, the hinge amount is less than 0, so I've already converted it, so it's looking for less than 0, so a negative number, so it's looking for anything less than 0. If it's less than 0, it's going to take that hinge amount, it's going to divide it by 100, and then it's going to add 1. That makes it 0 to 1 instead of, negative. And then I'm going to divide it by 2, so that gives me a movement from 0 to 0.5 to the noon position. So that's what this math does. Now, if that's true, it's just going to output that volume to our volume 1, volume 2, and the 0 to 0.5. So, well, then how do we get the other half, right, to get it to go to 1? Well, once it's greater to or equal to 0, we're going to do the same math. So it's giving me a positive number here. And then I'm going to divide it by 2. So this gives me my 0.5, and then I'm just going to add that 0.5 to it. So once I go from 0, it's going to be like 0.01 or whatever it is, 0.1, or yeah. And then it's going to add 0.5, which is my value here, which gives me a smooth rotation from 0 to 1 all the way around. And it doesn't matter what your limit is. It doesn't matter what this number is, as long as it matches your limit. So if I wanted to go 160 to 160 on my limit, then this would have to be 160, 160. And same thing, it's just outputting those values. So this just takes over where this leaves off. So hopefully that made sense. So let's go back into Unity. Let's just take our TV control and put it on our TV. And it's not going to show me my values because, that's just the way we roll. Let me make a quick change here. And I'll make this script available in the description. Okay, so now we need channel 1. We need audio 1. We need channel 2. And we need audio 2. Okay, so now let's go ahead and assign our knob values. So if you come up to your volume knob and click on knob handle, and then we're going to go down to our hinge joint, and then we're going to hit use limits, and we're going to expand this out. And we want this to be negative 100 and 100. And this is going to limit our knob from 100 to 100 when we go this way. Now the only thing I'll say about this is you don't want to go 180 to 180. You want to leave a dead zone. If you do 180 to 180, sometimes it'll break and it'll go on around. So just leave yourself a little bit of dead space. And like I said, whatever this value is here in your script, make sure that matches your value here. And then you don't want to use a negative number. So if it's negative 100 to 100 on your hinge, just make this 100, make this 100. Or if you're doing 160, 160, 160. I tried this with a float value that I could change in the inspector, and some of you were wondering, well, why didn't you just do that? Well, it wasn't calculating correctly, and I don't know why. I tried it different ways. For some reason, if this wasn't 160, it wouldn't calculate correctly. So, but I found by just putting the number there, it works. I don't know why. It's a funky bug with Unity, I guess, that I've run across. So you can try it if you want, but let's say if I change this to, if I put a float value up here and I say it's equal to 100, and then I put that name here for that float, for some reason it would only go 0.75 to 0.75 or 0.5 to 0.5. I don't know why, but you put the number there and it works. So that's why. Okay, so now let's go down to our on hinge change. So this is how we're going to pass our value over to our script. Now anytime you're doing this, just add one. You can do it on snap change too. And then we just need where our script is at, which is on my TV. And then we're going to come down to TV control, and then we're going to go to volume. It's a dynamic float. Whenever you do a pass value, when we're passing a float, which is the hinge value, it's going to be up here. So we just need volume, and that's it. So now let's go down to our channel knob and click on knob handle and come down to our hinge joint, we're not going to limit this one. So you don't have to do anything here. I mean, unless you wanted to limit it, I guess you could, where it only goes to here. You could do the same thing. You could put a limit in, but that's how you limit the knob. Then we're going to come down to on hinge change, or on this one, on snap change, because we're snapping this one. So just add a snap. Same thing, my TV. And then we're going to go to TV control, and then we're going to go to on hinge change. Is that right? Yep, on hinge change. I don't know why I named it that way. Anyway, doesn't matter. So we're going to pass the value from our knob to on hinge change, which is just the name of our method. And then we're going to take the float value of whatever the hinge value is, the amount, and pass it here. And that's how you pass the value from the knob to a method inside of a script. Okay, so now let's come up to our volume knob, because I forgot to make a change. I'm going to click on knob handle and come down to your grabbable, and we need to change this to a fixed joint. Size, hold, everything's good there. Yep. And then if you come down to, I don't know if you made the same slip up as I did. If you come down here, I accidentally, on channel 2, I accidentally put player, video player 2. We don't want that. We want channel 2. Okay, I was just checking that out in VR, and then I realized something, that at this point when I was building this thing is when I realized that the prefab knob, for using this in a non-snap, if you pull it from a prefab, is actually broken, and I couldn't figure out why. But this is how I fixed it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and take this knob, and we're going to delete it. And then File, Save, and this will show you how to get a fixed knob. So let's go over to our project, go into BNG Framework. What scene am I in? Okay. Go into Scenes, go into XR Demo Scene. Come over to the wall. Enable my items. The one in the scene is not broken. So come over to Assets, and then I'm just going to take this whole knob and pull it in, and that gives me a fixed knob prefab. So now save it, and then I can go back to my scenes, and then I can go back to my, where did I put that scene at? Oh, I'm still in the same scene. Hey, that's the scene I was in. Oh, no it wasn't. Let's go back into BNG Framework, figure out where I was at. I know where I was. Scenes. Alright, finally figured out where the heck I was. Okay. So, once you have your prefab, we can pull that one in here. Now we have a fixed knob. And we can change this to 0. Change this to 0. And this can just be a straight up -90. Pull that forward. Get it up to where we were. All parked out. Sorry about that. But anyway, now you know that the knob is actually broken. And this is how you can get one that actually works. I have yet to figure out the correlation on that. So let's just go back down to our knob handle. Well, smooth knob. Disable the grabble. Come down to our knob handle. Come down to our hinge joint. And we're going to use limits. And our minimum is -100 or +100. And come on down here, and then we'll come down to on hinge change, and then we'll grab our TV again, because that's where we put that script. And then we'll come down here, we'll go to TV control, and then we'll go to volume. And save. Oops, wrong volume. So click back on your on hinge change, go down to TV control, and go to volume underneath dynamic floats. You want this one, not this one. Okay, let's test it out. Here's our TV. Channel 1. The volume's working. See, we got a limit. Still outputting our numbers from our 0 to 360, but that's not the values we're getting. And channel 2. And turns them both off. You could replace this with white noise or however you wanted to set up those textures, and then just add to the script. Okay, so now that you have that basic idea of how all that kind of works, I hope I didn't stumble on it too much. If you wanted to make this bigger because you made all of your aspect ratios the same, you could just click on My TV and you could just size it up and make it as big as you want it to be. And it'll keep its aspect ratio. So let me make that as big as a movie theater. And we'll jump in VR real quick and check that out. And there you have it. Okay, so there you have a new mechanic for the game. The main thing I want you to take away from this is how you can trigger the events and pass the values from the knobs. So remember, whenever you're passing a value from the knob, it's simply assigning your script here, selecting your dynamic float of whatever you made your method. So we're just passing the value of this hinge to that script. And when you make on your script, you just want to make them publics so that you can access them, and then you're going to float the hinge amount for the knob, and then you can use that value in your script. That's what I hope you take away from it. But you know, you've got a cool little TV mechanic that you could throw in a bar or something, and I don't know, maybe you wanted to have newscast on 4 channels that you could interactively switch between, and they all end at the same time and in broadcast, and then a missile goes off outside, a bomb or something like that. I don't know, there's all kinds of things. Or maybe you just want to make a movie theater and watch your favorite movie in VR and have your movie collection in there. However you want to use it. But I hope you found this informative. I know I had a little stumble with that knob being broken. I actually forgot about that, but I hope you found it informative, and stay tuned for more tutorials. Thanks again. Thanks for joining.